In the second half of 2020, Germany will assume the presidency of the Council of the European Union. The consequences of the coronavirus pandemic present Europe with an enormous challenge. Together, we want to work for Europe's recovery. How do we achieve this? By ensuring that Europe emerges from the crisis with greater solidarity and cohesion within, and more capable and sovereign abroad. We want to be even more united in all our diversity. What issues will be important in the future? We want to advance the European Union on strategically important issues like climate change, security, refugees and migration, the rule of law, and the digital transformation. We want to become even more innovative and sustainable in order to better overcome future challenges. The Presidency's cultural program is forward-looking. At its heart is the artwork Earth Speaker by Olafur Eliasson, in which Europe's children call on political leaders to listen. Based on our common values, we are committed to acting as a driving force and facilitator for a strong and capable Europe in the world.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the European High-Level Conference Digilabs20 on the topic how digital innovation hubs are serving public administration. The digital change is particularly challenging for the public sector. Therefore, many EU countries have established digital innovation hubs or digital governance labs or living labs to serve and to support civil servants and institutions by developing better online services. For the first time, the European Digilabs meet today and tomorrow to exchange their experiences on where and how do the best ideas, concepts emerge? How are these developed into prototypes? How do innovation become a sustainable success? How can e-government services be better promoted? And how can digital change be shaped? Ladies and gentlemen, nearly 600 participants from 35 countries will listen today and tomorrow to discuss with our 33 speakers from all over Europe. My name is Christian Rupp, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of the joint eGov and Open Data Innovation Lab here in Lübeck. And I'm honored and pleased to be the moderator together with my colleagues, Professor Moreen HEINE and Jan Hetfeld, the next days in this outstanding conference to help you, to moderate you, to guide you through the program. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, this conference was planned from the beginning as a hybrid conference in the beautiful Hanseatic city of Lübeck, which is, with around 217,000 inhabitants, the second largest city on the German Baltic coast and in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. Due to the lockdown all over Europe, this conference is now more or less an online event. We are here, as you have seen in the intro, in the ultra-modern conference room of the Congress Hotel Slowdown on the Prival in Lübeck-Travemünde. To give you all online participants a feeling of being on site, we have included some impressions in the intro video of Lübeck's city center, which is Germany's most extensive UNESCO World Heritage Site. This high-level conference is organized on the occasion of Germany's presidency of the Council of the European Union by the joint eGov and Open Data Innovation Lab, which was founded by the University of Lübeck and the software and consulting company Mach AG with support of the state country of Schleswig-Holstein. The patronage of this conference has the Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community in the Federal Republic of Germany. And therefore, it's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker and for the opening session, Mr. Ernst BÜRGER. Ernst, are you here?
Yes.
Yes. Ernst is the Director General for Digital Administration, Management of the Online Access Act in the German Federal Ministry for the Interior, Building and Community in Berlin. And after studying law and working as a legal practitioner and tutor in Münster, he entered the Federal Ministry of Interior in 1998. Since then, he held several positions, especially in the field of information society and e-government. Since June 2020, he is the head of the newly established General Directorate for Digital Administration and the management of the Online Access Act in the ministry. Dear Ernst, the digital floor is yours, and we are looking forward to your keynote.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear e-government fellows and friends of digitization in the public sector, a very warm welcome to all of you to this Digilab20 conference in Germany. I have the honor to open this conference as a part of the German EU presidency, which we provide physically in Lübeck, northern Germany, a beautiful and small-sized city, famous for special architecture you heard about and special sweets like marzipan, for poets and writers, for trade and traders, and an early kind of European Economic Union, so-called the Hanse. And we provide it, of course, in special times remote. So we are now guests in your living rooms or working rooms at home. Thank you for this possibility and thank you for joining us. Thank you also to the joint e-government and open data innovation lab in Lübeck for the organization and all the support for this event. Thank you for the federal state Schleswig-Holstein for the support and being the host with the city of Lübeck. And special thanks to Christian Rupp. He is the enabler and the spiritual father of this conference. Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, to my staff members for the hard work and the support in difficult circumstances now. My name is Ernst BÜRGER. I'm the head since the 1st of June of the department responsible for organization and digitization of the public sector in Germany, and especially for the implementation of the Online Access Act, which obligate all administrations and authority levels in Germany to deliver all services until 2022 also online about a central administrator portals. And they're talking about 575. This is a huge challenge for all the German federal levels. Digitization is a lot, even in the public sector. I want to give you 3 different glimpses now on this issue. Digitization in the COVID pandemic, digitization in labs, and some remarks to the European Union. Next slide, please. No, sorry, no, it's correct. Thank you. This year, everybody knows, COVID changed the lives of all of us. Things that we have taken for granted are not a matter of course anymore. Daily shuttle to work, the contact with friends and family, as well as our freedom of movement have been restricted by an invisible threat, which had very real effects on our everyday life. Even for the politics, the public administration, the entire society is going through an uncertain time. We are challenged like almost never before. But on the other side, in my personal opinion, there's one thing that we can consider positive: the fact that digitization is no longer seen as a nice to have, but accepted as a must have for a functioning society and a reliable public administration. In every country, in our countries, whether it is Italy, France, Belgium, or Denmark, COVID pandemic forces us to seize the opportunity of digitization. Digital solutions have gained significantly in importance with the outbreak of the crisis. And although working and meeting only remote is not a perfect solution, we realized one thing: when it comes down to it, it works, and in some aspects better than expected. Now please the next slide. Thank you. Even in Germany, where people is traditionally sensible and very nervous about data protection and data security, we managed to switch to digital solutions from one day to the other, and were able to implement an app COVID-19 warning, which up to now has been downloaded more than 20 million times. And also, we just promote another app for registration, people traveling to Germany or Germans coming back from holiday back to home, in order to improve the tracing for infected persons. It is not a secret, I think, that Germany is not a front runner when it comes to digitization. Especially public administration, we have a lot of catching up to do. But it is remarkable how COVID became a catalyst for the digitization projects we had already started within the implementation of the Online Access Act. We acted quickly and decided that this pandemic required us to change our priorities. I want to give you 1 or 2 examples how we reacted to this situation. During Germany's first lockdown in March and April of this year, there were suddenly over 1.3 million eligible people who were entitled to compensation under the Infection Protection Act due to loss of wages because of quarantine or the closing of the kindergarten and the closing of the schools. In comparison, 1 year earlier, in 2019, less than 200 applications for this compensation have been submitted. Even without a lockdown, such an increase in demand would be hard to manage by the public administration. In addition, interpersonal contacts of all kinds had to be reduced to a minimum, while thousands of administrative employees worked from home and the offices remained closed. So, what did we do about the situation? In the beginning of April, we started an express digitization lab and developed an online services in only 36 days. It took only 36 days from the start of the laboratory to the implementation of the online services in 11 German federal states. The service is user-friendly, it is time-saving, it is fully digital, it is accessible in nearly all over Germany. I mean, for us, German public administration, who have lagged behind when it comes to digitization for so long, that is a record-breaking outcome. And we did it again. We did it again in the summertime, in July, for small and middle-sized companies in Germany who needed financial support. We've provided also fully digital online services, together with 15 federal member states of Germany, and totally in 3.5 weeks. And we bring out, for example, the short-time allowance with an app in 1 week. So the question is, please, the next slide, please. No, next one. Yes. Why were we able to do this in only 36 days or in 3.5 weeks? Because since we started the implementation of the Online Access Act, we used the method of Digilabs, and we have made steep learning curve. We were able to fall back on these existing experiences. In our Digilabs, we work without ranking. We work agile, with a multiple stakeholder, with a user-centric approach. To say it short, we work different, what we're used to from working in public administration. In our Digilabs, we work with interdisciplinary teams with members from administration. Law and ICT come together for a design thinking workshop and collaborate with citizens to figure out what digital offer can look like in the future. We have learned a lot about how this kind of an agile work environment can inspire us and how it can make our work more modern and efficient. Agile methods make us flexible. Planning in iterations, including several stakeholders, using dynamic structures, make it possible to react and change courses when unexpected things happen, like with this pandemic. We have already run over 20 of these laboratories, and I can highly recommend you to take part in a Digilab when you get the possibility and to start working with agile methods. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another thing the pandemic, as well as the Online Access Act itself, has shown us. To build a successful digital infrastructure, we have to work together and overcome the silo mentality, which unfortunately is very common in public administrations. That is why in the Online Access Act, we are pushing the importance of the one-for-all approach. That means that every solution in the Online Act implementation is developed only once by one federal state, and every other state uses the solution afterwards too. We did that with the express development I already told you about. One state, in this case North Rhine-Westphalia, thank you for that, developed the services with us and operated centrally. All other 11 countries connected to the existing solution via an online service. As a result, the federal states have not only saved time and in implementation, but also financial resources. We as well as the German government believes that the one-for-all approach is the key to a fast and extensive digitization of German public administration. That is why the government provided another 3 billion euros in the Corona stimulus package for the implementation of the Online Access Act. But only if the Online Access Act projects in federal states and municipalities stick to the one-for-all principle, the money will be provided, of course. That makes enough of pressure. Joint digitization solutions are perfect to act quickly in a crisis and to react to changing framework conditions, because there's only one service that needs to be changed or developed, and not in every federal state. Digital services like the Corona compensation for employers and self-employed saved livelihood during the crisis. The digital solutions we used during the pandemic are the blueprint for how we can imagine a digital state in the very near future. But more important, it has shown us how to use the power of digitization to create new, effective implementation structures for better services and improve our citizens' daily life. Let me give some remarks to the European Union in the end. In my personal opinion, the blueprint can also be transferred to all of Europe. Let us please find an approach together for a digital and connected European Union. Conferences like this are important as a communication and exchange today, in times of crisis, are more important than ever before. We can learn from each other, and we should use solutions that have already been developed and used in other countries. Our learnings from the Online Access Act can be used for a single digital gateway and the other way around. Our experiences with digital labs as well. In my opinion, for our digitization projects, it is better to cooperate right away from the very beginning and have the European dimension at mind than to have to adjust something afterwards. The one-for-all principle can be a solution for the European digitization projects as well. And for everything we do, it is important, very, very important, the most important, to always have the citizens' interests at heart. We need to work together to provide it from them as soon as possible, whether it is digital identities or online services in public administration. Let us try to have less bureaucracy and more agility. In every European country, there already are great solutions and experiences when it comes to digitization and Digilabs. Let's share them. Let us learn from each other and let us work together. Let us use the power of digitization to create new, effective implementation structures for better services and improve our citizens' daily life. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bürger. If you have any questions, just use the chat function below the live streaming. There's a chat window where you can send us questions. Ernst, one question on the Online Access Act. A lot of our international participants, I think they don't know what the Online Access Act is really about. I think you have a video about what is the German Online Access Act.
Yes, we have. If you
Yeah.
want, you can start it, please.
Can we see the video? Thank you. I think everybody can imagine now the huge change for a federal republic by such an Online Access Act. Ernst, what is your personal learning from the COVID-19 crisis with regard to digitization?
That it is a little bit silly that regarding to the history of human beings, it needs sometimes crisis to change reliable and quickly things in a better way.
You supported this first Digilabs conference under the German EU presidency. Can you imagine a sustainable network for European Digilabs and then yearly, let's say, conference like this under the next following presidencies?
Oh yeah, of course. That's a very, very excellent idea, Christian. One of the reasons that digital projects in the public sector are too slowly is that we have work in a special kind together in our administration structures who are built up about 200 years. And I can recommend heartily that Digilab method to bring better user-centric and faster digital services to our citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Bürger. Thank you, Ernst, for being part of this conference, to be virtual here on stage on your personal screen. And I hope you heard also the digital applause from all the participants worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, digital government is not about just moving offline services and processes onto the internet with technology solutions. It's more re-engineering and redesigning of services and making government user-driven in determining needs and encouraging collaboration to address them. For governments, the COVID-19 pandemic removed any luxury of choice in digital being the default. Since many years, my personal slogan is e-government, it's a journey, it's not a destination. And on this, let's say, on this journey, digital apps often have the task getting the public sector on the right track, involving customers in the design process, and sometimes also teaching digital literacy or competences. The digital transformation is especially challenging for municipalities, for small municipalities. Europe has around 100,000 municipalities. Schleswig-Holstein is the northernmost of the 16 states of Germany and has 1,106 politically independent municipalities. We are glad that Schleswig-Holstein has taken over the sponsorship and also the being hosted here in Schleswig-Holstein. And I welcome now the State Secretary, Dirk Schröter, who is the head of the State Chancellery in Schleswig-Holstein. In his function, he is primarily responsible for planning and coordinating the political priorities like digitalization of the state government. Dirk studied economics at the University of Potsdam. He's a lecturer also in economics and public finance at the University of Applied Sciences for Administration and Services of the State of Schleswig-Holstein, and author of numerous articles for the Yearbook of Public Finance. Mr. State Secretary, welcome, and the digital floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rupp, Director General BÜRGER, representatives of the EU member states and digitalization labs, dear guests and colleagues from administration, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you who are with us online for the EU conference of the Digital Labs. The topic of this conference is digitalization, a highly complex subject. To be precise, we will be talking about digitalization in public administration, which is even more complex. So I decided I would add a bit more complexity still by talking about artificial intelligence in Schleswig-Holstein's administration. Hardly any other aspect of digitalization is as ambivalent, as mysterious, and therefore either threatening and promising for many as AI. If you listen to Elon Musk talking about AI, you get the impression that we either have to become cyborgs ourselves or AI will make us superfluous. I must admit that digitalization is as well is an invitation to create a world of fantasy, to dream of unheard of possibilities. The farther digitalization progresses, the greater are the hopes we place in it. On the lines of, at present, AI is learning to play Go. Tomorrow it will win the global battle against hunger. But there's something people tend to forget, the long road in between. It is true that digitalization is a form of automation, but nevertheless, there's no way it can implement itself. In public administration, especially the road from a digital display of waiting numbers to a one-stop shop citizen account is long and involves great many small steps. To my mind, it is in bridging this gap between visions on the one hand and the hard task of step-by-step implementation on the other that the real importance of digital labs lies. You are both a source of ideas and visions and a handyman's workshop where viable solutions are sought by trial and error. And it is viable solutions that will be seeking today and in the future. The good thing is that we all have a similar objective and can use this conference to exchange opinions. What examples of best practice do we have? Where are the dead ends? As a representative of Germany's host state, I would like to use my welcome address to tell you a little about Schleswig-Holstein. Not about its coastlines and not about its fields, but about our digital landscape and especially about AI. Ladies and gentlemen, in Schleswig-Holstein, we agreed at an early stage that complex development like AI can only be handled if industry and academic research collaborate closely with politics and administration. To reach this agreement, we first had to establish common ground. We brought the relevant players together at conferences and prepared an AI strategy. It is important to me to emphasize that we have to get everybody on board before we set course towards such major changes. No administration, no small or medium-sized enterprise can implement comprehensively and sustainably on its own. So what are our common principles? With course are we to set? Together we are building AI made in Schleswig-Holstein and breaking the applications down to suit concrete and specific fields. AI made in Schleswig-Holstein is based firmly on the principles that human activity has priority and also on high standards in respect to robustness, security, data protection, transparency, and fairness. And another thing is important to me. Digitalization is not an end in itself. It is an instrument we have to adapt to suit our purposes. So as a regional administration, we ask ourselves, how can we use AI to improve our work? In simple terms, we have to consider three directions. First, administration itself. Secondly, our approach to the public. Thirdly, our approach to policy planning. In the first two steps, especially, we have the advantage that public administration works according to rules. And if there anything AI can do well, it is applying rules quickly and reliably. Simple planning and organizational processes are therefore potential fields in which it can be used. One area we are looking at is a possibility of speeding up certain building projects, such as the extension of power lines or widening our Kiel canal. With AI, petitions from the public can be evaluated and suggested answers prepared for the employees of the planning department. In the medium term, our objective will be to simplify labor-intensive routine procedures with the aid of electronic systems. Where the public is concerned, it will also be a matter of increasing accessibility and convenience. Possibility includes chatbots, digital speech assistants, and classification of text, image, and sound data, or analysis of IoT sensor data. The use of AI in public administration is an ideal way of helping make AI applications available to the population as a whole. If a good chatbot finds the right forms for a member of the public and helps him to fill them in, that person can convince himself that AI has concrete uses. That promotes its acceptance. Together with the IT service provider Dataport and the joint e-government and open data innovation lab here in Lübeck, we are currently developing pilot applications for the use of AI in public administration. Our services can already be accessed round the clock, 7 days a week, through the chatbot at the integration office or for questions on measures to contain the coronavirus. The next step will be to receive applications by this system. Ladies and gentlemen, AI can only be as good as the data record on which it's based. That is why, at the same time, Schleswig-Holstein are pushing ahead with an open data portal, in which we collect data and make them available. The open data portal constitutes a reliable and expanding database for the developing AI applications and training for their use. Not only can the general public, companies, associations, and research institutions use the portal to view data records on a diversity topics, in future they themselves will be able to supply data on this platform. This will help us to enlarge our platform. In addition, we intend to set up a non-public data platform to provide information from administration, industry, and data donation for authorized users. With a reliable data pool of this kind, we are well equipped for modern data-driven governance. So you see, we are warming up and taking the first steps, making plans. But like most other things, implementation costs money and requires personnel. We have already backed up a large part of our projects with money. We have some 40 million euros available for concrete AI activities in Schleswig-Holstein from state funds, and will invest this money in projects with the greatest possible leverage. And for the coming EU funding period, we will define AI as a major topic, as a major focus. In future, our state administration will need even more people who can come up with creative solutions and recognize and grasp the opportunities offered by better use data. Digitalization is a continuous process that employees too will have to support by being ready to question the familiar, optimize and accept changes. We intend to promote these competences in public administration and encourage a willingness to accept change. Above all, that we will be an important task of our executive staff. This goes hand in hand with a different way of handling data. Our state's administration must combine existing data better and put them to better use. That is something we have to promote. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still at the beginning of a development that promises to open up great opportunities. One that encourages us to try out and experiment. And a development that means we will have to labor on continuously in small steps. Even before we have taken the first big step, the coronavirus pandemic is urging us to hurry. These recent months have made it abundantly clear how important digitalized in administration is. This Digilabs20 conference could scarcely be more topical or more urgent. I wish to thank the Joint e-Government and Open Innovation Lab, and in particular, Professor HEINE, Mr. Hetfeld, and Mr. Robb. My thanks also go to the Federal Ministry of Interior, State Secretary Richter, and Director General BÜRGER for their assistance. I wish you all existing discussions and valuable exchanges of your opinion. Thank you for being in Lübeck. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being at this conference.
Thank you, Mr. State Secretary, and thank you that you also talked about how you interact already with Digilabs. And Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear online participants, welcome back. We are perfectly in time due to the discipline of our speakers. And next will be the keynote of Professor Dr. Ines MERGEL, why we need digital academies for the public sector. Ines, we are very excited that you are here and that you, together with other, let's say, this podium's discussion people here on stage on your personal screens. Professor Moreen HEINE will then moderate afterwards this panel discussion. And we are looking forward, Ines, to your explanations why we need these digital academies and why digital competences are so important, especially in the public sector, but also for our customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christian. I also see that you have my slides. So thank you, first of all, for the invitation. And I'm really sorry that I can't be there with you in the room. So I will be talking about digital competencies and what kind of capacity is necessary then to create the conditions for digital transformation. And as a first slide, I would like to acknowledge that my presentation is based on, if you could switch to the next slide, is based on 3 different projects. 2 of them are funded by the European Commission under the EU Horizon 2020. If you could please go ahead with all 3. Under the Horizon 2020 scheme, one is an Interreg project here on smart government, and the third one is a non-funded project on teaching public service in the digital age, where we are aiming to basically extract exactly those digital competencies that are necessary to push forward and bring public administrators to the next level. In the next slide, you see that my agenda. I will briefly talk about what the new normal looks like. Then I will try to define what digital competencies are and what then that there are preconditions for the implementation and use of digital transformation. And then I will present to you the 8 competencies that we have derived and explain briefly what they mean, and then an outlook on how we can reach digital maturity by bringing our civil servants, public servants to the next level. So let me start with the next slide with a short story that I like to tell at this point. So what is the new normal? Imagine 2 small fish swimming in the ocean, and an older, more senior fish comes their way and says, "Hey boys, how is the water today?" The 2 young fish look at each other, don't know what he's talking about. They go along, and after a while, they look at each other again and say, "Huh? What's water?" And that tells you that lots of civil servants might have the same expressions on their face when you talk to them about digital and what that means. For some of them, it will be the new normal. They know they're in the water, they are swimming, they are happy that this is happening, and they are, let's do it, I need more of this. Others will be saying to you, I'm a pedestrian, I have no idea what water is. So then they probably have their paper forms, they haven't been exposed in any kind of digital project to be involved, they haven't had their processes changed yet. There's no e-filing in their world. And then there's a third group. They say, I'm in the water, but I'm drowning. Those are the people we need to address, right? Because they understand that the new normal is here, but they don't have the skills to actually deal with it. And this little story also reflects how public servants have different levels of competencies and maybe also different ways of dealing with the current problem. Some might want to be exposed to this. This is their lifeline. And others are saying, well, if I'm no longer in the office, I'm in the home office, then hopefully the physical files will come to me at some point and I can keep working. But it also tells a story of how we deal with digital and have different types of assumptions or hypotheses about it. And that will then also direct the way that we will navigate the current challenges and deal with that and talk to our superiors and to other teams about digital. What we have seen is that as a result, on the next slide, is that lots of governments have set out now to create internal government digital academies. This is certainly a result of the lack of digital competencies, but also probably having to have more power over what is being taught and what kind of competencies are ad hoc need to be taught to civil servants. And as a result also of the new public management era, where lots of those things that were not considered as core competencies, and IT was certainly one of those things, were outsourced to external consultants, to IT service providers, and it's usually left public administrations with a bare minimum of knowledge on how to, do the financing for digital projects, list the requirements. It's usually then pushed to the IT department in the basement or to the legal advisors who have to write contracts with external service providers. But the core of public administrators are not trained in any of these digital competencies. I've listed a few here. I think the most prominent is probably the GDS Academy in the UK as part of the Government Digital Service Team. It's kind of a spin-off there. But then also in the core of the European Union, we have, for example, a new team in the Agency for Digitization in the Ministry of Finance in Denmark, who've worked for a year now to come up with the core or the minimum digital competencies that all 30,000 civil servants are supposed to have. And then there are others outside, obviously, of the European Union who are also engaging in those kinds of activities. And they have different types of business models. So some of them are just about defining what digital competencies are and then are outsourcing the actual training, again, to third-party providers. Others have core programs and are delivering those themselves. And then again, others are creating customized and ad hoc programs, really depending on what certain agencies need. And so I'm trying to define as a next step on the next slide what types of digital competencies we can talk about. And on the lowest level, if you go forward, are the technological competencies. Those are basically those kinds of skills where people know how to switch on a computer, they know how to click somewhere and that something is happening, they know how to use certain tools and technologies, so that's called the technological competencies. A layer above that are information competencies, and those are very different types of competencies. We know then that people understand that they need different type of data to fulfill their jobs or to look for a solution to a problem they have in their job. And they know how to get that type of data. So they are reaching out then to different types of sources, either inside their organization in those databases or even outside. Someone just talked about open data platforms. So they know where to look. They know what kind of data they need, what kind of information they need to solve a problem, and they know how to get access to it. And then on the highest level, is what is called digital adaptivity, a competence that basically allows those people then also to switch seamlessly between different types of technologies and know that for a certain type of problem, I might need a different type of tool. And I go and look for that type of tool if it's available already in our organization, or if it's not available, then I see if I can make it work for my purposes. And we have certainly seen this during COVID, where everyone had to switch to video conferencing tools, and we saw a lot of shadow IT repurposed for agency purposes, just because there was this need to stay connected, to have conversations, to talk about cases and so on, and to get the job done. And then we saw kind of a pragmatic post hoc validation of those tools, and now everyone basically has their own video conferencing tool, and it's adapted to the organization. And then if you click next, there's also all of this is embedded in the larger context of the organization, and there has to be a certain degree of digital readiness of the organization itself. We've seen this during COVID, that not a lot of organizations had laptops available to send their staff members home with their own home office configuration. So there were large numbers that had to be bought. There need to be contracts that you can even work from home, digitally remote, and all these kinds of things. So if that's not part of the context and you don't have those kinds of capacities in place, it will be definitely hard to even do this. And so if you go to the next slide, I briefly don't want to go too in depth and go too all nerdy on you, just in terms of how we define digital competencies and what the process was across these projects, and then accumulating in those 8 competencies that I will talk about today is that in this project, teaching digital competencies in the for public servants, we have come up from our core team. We've recruited over 18 different universities and academics who work in this field to work with us to create an open access syllabus based on the 8 competencies. So in order to get to those 8 competencies, we also included lots of practitioners from, for example, digital service teams. And we've done really in-depth research. So we've done expert interviews first. We've then tried to hone in on the actual skills and competencies that are necessary and did focus groups on those. And then we are now in the process also to do expert validations. We are talking to a lot of deans and in the future also more government digital academies to see if these competencies even make sense. So that's kind of the background of how we got here. And now I want to talk about the 8 competencies that we have developed. So we'll start with the first one. If you go to the next slide. The first competency is user centricity. Others before me have already talked about this topic. It basically focuses on the need of public administrations to focus on the needs of users, and users can be obviously internal users of those who are responsible for a digital service that they are either creating or are in the process of. It also means that it's a complete shift of understanding that public servants are not necessarily the real experts in this. They understand this from their internal logic of how they interpret policies and how they then implement them, and for example, in form of a digital service. But the real experts who are then using the public service are the users, and they are usually outside of the organization. They don't have the same type of logic. And when services are poorly designed and implemented, citizens might feel disrespected in their needs and not listened to, unappreciated, or they might even feel discriminated against. And that makes all those issues that that people then have to physically come to the office and queue around the hallway. Those issues are then increasing. We are increasing administrative burdens for them because they might be going online, downloading the form, filling it out at home, and then they're sitting in front of a public servant who types all this in front of their eyes. So those are administrative burdens that are too high oftentimes. Most of the forms are too complicated. So understanding from the beginning what the users actually need is a core skill and a competency to have. And so we're going to the next one, the competency 2. We have defined them as risks. And so we need to anticipate and mitigate risks in terms of privacy, security, but also ethical risk when we are applying new technologies. And obviously, this is baked into many advanced bureaucracies, but there are always possibilities of new technologies and even old technologies that might expose citizens to new and unknown risks and harms. I just want to make that one example where, for example, COVID test results are pasted into Excel spreadsheets, and then Excel has a limited number of cells available, so that thousands of positive cases were then underreported, and citizens were not informed about their test results. So these things can obviously always happen with any kind of technology, and we have to be aware that this is happening. And so we need to also think about things like the Corona apps and how data is collected right now. So very current examples popping up really fast when we talk about this risk competency. Competency 3 is about multidisciplinarity. And so when I talk about that, it's usually that public servants and tell me, well, we always work in teams. Here, the focus is on multidisciplinary teams. So it's not that people don't know how to work on teams or how to manage projects on teams, but this is blending the traditional public service skills with modern digital skills. That also means that we might have completely different competencies and different types of roles on those teams now. Service designers, for example, come to mind. We usually don't have them in government. It's a very recent phenomenon. We might also need software developers, front-end and back-end developers on those teams to already talk about what a digital service might look like. So with those experts, people need to be able to work effectively with and mix legal, technical, design, policy, and management skills on all those teams. And the next competency is iteration. And iteration comes from the general field of agile work environments and work practices that are now introduced in digital labs and in innovation labs and so on. And so iteration is all about understanding that we are shifting project management practices from waterfall. Waterfall is usually what we know as strategic planning. We are making long-term plans. We have phases of those types of project steps that we work through, and when a phase is over, we close that step and don't revisit it. And iteration comes from software development and has been around since, I think, the 70s, so it has a long tradition already outside of government. And if you think back, so if you are traditionally trained in public administration, you have probably heard Lindblom's modeling through approach that really reflects how projects are really getting done. And so if we are then introducing iteration also into digital service delivery, it means that we're allowing frequent feedback loops, we're allowing different opinions and needs to be integrated into the project phases. And we are continuously learning and are creating usable knowledge as we do this, and hoping that the actual outcome is delivered faster, but also of much higher quality. And so this is something new that we have to train civil servants in then. Don't make this necessarily about digital. It can be applied to any kind of project. And we have to contrast it to other ways of working or project management approaches. Obviously, this is not useful when building a highway. You can't build highways with iteration, but it's interesting to do this and useful and gets us to better results when we do this in software development and digital projects. The next competency that we identified is change management. This might also sound very traditional, obviously a leadership skill. But here, what we mean by this is that we need to identify opportunities to improve government operations with technology. So in the digital age, this is not just about culture, but understanding that technology can actually deliver services better, and that we need to find ways to overcome the structural and institutional obstacles that we are facing. Those might be internal and external barriers. And then some technologies might even create tensions. We know this around the whole discussion on artificial intelligence, for example, that might not match with the standard operating procedures that we have in place. So there are those skills necessary then to resolve those challenges and to overcome those obstacles. Competency 6 then focuses on working in the open or openness generally. With that, I don't mean open data, even though this is obviously closely related. This is really about a range of techniques and tools that government can make available to their to public servants to work more openly on projects, to collaborate also across government silos, and also increase accountability. So use techniques that open up the black box of government. We know that lots of projects are sharing their software code, for example, on GitHub, making it available to others for comments, for reuse when it's already a fully fledged product at the end, or they are asking for input, for help. How do we solve this? So this would be one way to work in the open. We can also share ideas on the social intranet. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on a daily basis. And that brings me to the next competency, number 7. That's called data. And yeah, so data, obviously lots of the decision making in government is based on data. The data is not always accessible where it's needed. So we need to be able to identify data needs to then make informed decisions. This doesn't mean that we have to train our civil servants in becoming data scientists. This is not what I mean by that. I mean that they need to be able to locate where to find the data in government silos. Know how to access that data and use the data, and then ultimately make better decisions on it. Competency 8 then focuses on affordances, and we have kind of used this term or adopted this term also from the software and design language. So this is about affordances here in the organizational context, and in combination with digital technologies, then focuses on the ability to assess critically assess and then identify opportunities of new technologies. Does it even make sense to use blockchain or artificial intelligence in government, or is government operations not set up to do this? But then also assess the risks again. So see both sides of opportunities and what might be destroyed in terms of public value when we are using new technologies. And that brings me then to some of my final slides. On the next slide, I would briefly like to discuss how we can, with those competencies, then gain digital maturity. So if you switch to the next slide, so digital maturity has, in my point of view, 3 different steps that we can take. We need digital government leaders who understand digital trends. They understand that they are disruptive technologies. They are able to assess whether those technologies even make sense. They get lots of really colorful marketing prospects on their desk, so understand how to go through them, but also have those kinds of work skills and work practices that I talked about. So if the leaders don't understand what Agile is and what these new project management tools are, then they probably don't lead their teams in those ways. They don't understand that the user needs are also internal needs combined with external user needs, and they might not be able to actually lead the change management processes to get there. Next, the second piece to this is that we see obviously lots of experimentation in digital labs, innovation labs, these types of new organizational arrangements that are set up to be experimentation cultures. But we also need that kind of formal and informal learning across government. And by that, I don't mean that we are throwing all caution out of the window and are not looking at privacy and security things, but we need to create an enabling culture. And those in-house academies obviously help to do that because they are training digital stewards. We have accelerator models and so on. But it might also at times be helpful to have open laptops to simply test out solutions, technologies that others are already using, to be able to understand what the art of the possible is. Communities of practice on the social internet help also for this. At the core of reaching digital maturity is, however, that we derive requirements not from the newest trend that's out in the market. So is it really AI that is the solution to our social problems that we have in society and that public administrations have to solve? My opinion is that we need to gain digital maturity only by focusing on the subject area problems. That might be a social policy or a social problem. Then define the policy, and in that policy making process also think about what would this mean if we implement this in a digital format. So integrating policy making and implementation becomes more and more crucial, because if we don't do this, the technology becomes the problem. Then we have a short sentence at the end of a policy that then says, and please also use technology to do this. And all of a sudden we are standing there, have this huge technology problem at our hands, but we no longer think about the actual solution to a social problem that public administrations have to solve. And with that, I end my presentation, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ines, for your inspiring presentation, for your keynote. And I see that we have one question in our chat from Sascha Stutzenberger. He asks, competency 2 regarding risk due to the high number of laws, restrictions, etc., it will be hard for an individual to have an overview over all of that. Isn't it more about T-shaped individuals that come together in interdisciplinary teams, is his question.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is hitting on some important issues, right? We might have to change laws or regulations. I think we are seeing this already, and during the Corona pandemic, we've also seen that lots of the things were possible, even though there might have been laws for a digital for a physical signature that was quickly then changed into a digital signature. So I think there's lots of this that is correct what he said. I think we need certainly also we need to train policymakers to also understand what digital means and what we need in order to implement all this and not work around existing policies that were not shaped really for the digital era.
Thank you, Ines. And let's go on to our discussion panel. So welcome to our first discussion panel on this conference, and we want to take up the topic of the keynote and talk about building up digital skills, which are so much needed. First, please let me briefly introduce the participants of the discussion. Again, welcome Ines MERGEL. And again, this information, she is Professor of Public Administration at the University of Konstanz. Many thanks for your keynote, and I think it provides a lot of interesting insights. Thank you so much. And then I would like to welcome Cordula KIESSLING. She is Deputy Head of the Directorate General for Digital Administration at the German Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Urban Affairs, and she is responsible for the management of the Online Access Act. Welcome to our panel. We are also very pleased to welcome Silvana Filipponi. She leads the Digital Identity Solutions Division within the Digital Transformation Team for the Italian government. Welcome. And finally, I would like to welcome Lukas here on site. In 2013, he became CEO of the Austrian State Printing House with the main focus on secure digital identities, innovation, and exponential technologies. Welcome. I'm very pleased to welcome such highly experienced panelists. Great to have you here. And before we start with the discussion, I would like to draw your attention to the possibility of submitting your questions and comments about the keynote and to the panelists in our chat. Please feel free to get involved, and I will keep an eye on the chat. We start with our first question. And this one is going to Cordula KIESSLING. The digital transformation of the public sector requires new skills. How is this task approached in practice? What challenges can be observed, and what are your suggestions?
First of all, I would like to tanti saluti a Silvana, servus to Lukas, hello to Ines, and for all of you in Lübeck, a very short Moreen. I would have appreciated very much to be in Lübeck myself, as Ernst mentioned before, not only because of the sweets. Everyone who is participating online, who has not had the chance to visit Lübeck in person, you should do it one day, definitely. To your question. Since COVID-19, we all face our own VUCA world, or whatever we name it. Disruption has become shockingly concrete in the last months. Volatility. If you think about the infection process, nobody can predict the process. If you think about uncertainty, how long will this take? If you think about complexity with regard to the support packages of the governments, and if you with regard to ambiguity, be it virologist, be it appropriate countermeasures, leadership is needed, new leadership. We need decisions taken with courage. We need awareness. And we must define and establish a culture of error. Leadership needs to acknowledge that hierarchy in public administration is at least increasingly passing. It's not over yet. From the Federal Ministry of the Interior, I can tell you it's not over, but it's becoming less. And employees' needs have become a top priority, not only because the war of talents, and the needs are diverse, very diverse. We all know it. On the other side, employees must be willing and want to get to know new skills every day, long life learning. We must address both of it, I'm sure that. And digital skills, as Ines mentioned before, they are not only needed on IT dedicated jobs. If we think about all the legal advisors, all the ones who shape digital services, they need digital skills. And not every one of them is aware of this. COVID has been a very, very involuntarily crash course for some basic digital skills. As Ines mentioned them, these were the technical competencies, as Ines mentioned before. What do we do in the Federal Ministry? First of all, we participate in a meta study of the IT Planning Council to identify the skills we need. A meta study, the name is quite right, has identified 9 criteria with 53 skills relevant for the public service. So typical for Germany, 53. And we take all of them at once. No, that was not quite the meaning. And I won't go through them at all. Just name one: data literacy. Gathering, analyzing, evaluating data is quite important for all of us. Second, we improve digital skills, and we are working on significantly expanding advanced training courses for our employees. And at federal level, we will do so by gathering them all in a new digital academy. So, Ines, your next panel, you can add us on your slide, please. Digital Academy in Germany for the next panel. What will we do so? A user-oriented digital presence, a website with learning opportunities, an overview. Where can I participate? And very, very important, a low threshold access to these trainings offers. So we will start by very short videos to get to know what's about artificial intelligence, big data, agile methods, to get even the legal advisors to be interested in what is happening outside their legal world. And we will need face-to-face events, of course, every time when we cope with behavioral training, all these leadership competencies, the social and emotional skills, they are appropriate for face-to-face. It's hard to do in COVID times, but we need it desperately. And last thing, we want to have space to experience new ways of collaborating, new ways of working, innovation methods. Met firsthand, go outside your working environment and take part and learn to deal with failure and come back to your working environment and apply it on your job. We do it together with the digital innovation team. You will meet Jan-Ole Bayer later on, so I won't take anything in advance. challenge, my first challenge and my only challenge is, we all know it, facing heavy workload and facing staff shortages, management is not always quite willing to approve training courses. We all know it, and it's so wrong. We know it too. Management must be aware of the importance of empowering their teams. They are the ones who shape and make digital transformation be successful at the front lines. So this is the worst challenge and the most important recommendation to change this attitude.
Thank you very much, Cordula. And I would like to go on with concrete training methods. And I would like to ask Silvana, when we think about building up the necessary digital skills, what special training methods do you think are promising, especially from your experiences in the private sector? One focus could be on mentoring programs or informal ways of learning. So what experiences have you made in this area?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. It's very nice to meet you all. And yes, I think this question is very, very important, and continuous learning, lifelong learning is essential for anyone working in innovation and digital transformation. To my experience, it's important to combine standard learning techniques to informal ways of learning. In one of the companies I worked for, we used to have innovation breakfasts. So weekly appointment, weekly meetings early in the morning, where we were discussing about key innovation topics led by external experts and also followed by questions from the team. It was a true breakfast. We used to have pastries together, but it was perfect to exchange our views and learn. At the time, I mean, the situation is different, but also at the digital transformation team, we are building and creating virtual coffee chats around key topics about innovation to learn from each other. And that's very important. To my experience, it's important that these informal appointments are set in calendars and properly planned. They have an owner, so they can go ahead. And another way of learning, always informal, is from the others, from the people you're working with every day, from other teams you are collaborating. And as a leader, it is important to set these in a structured, a formal way. So starting from your teams, it's important to build the teams with different cultures, possible different countries, different experiences, different attitudes and mindset. This is crucial because in this way you have a true exchange between people. And it's also important to collaborate at any level in the organizations, between the public and the private, between large companies and startups. And again, it's not easy at the beginning. As a leader, it is important to set the strategy, set the framework, and then be very clear with the objectives, so everyone is in the same path, has got the same directions in the collaboration. I mean, in conclusions, I think that the continuous learning and the collaboration are essential. And they start as an attitude, but increases with practice. So needs to be set as a way of working, cannot be turned on special occasions. I think that's crucial to achieve the results, actually.
Thank you very much, Silvana. You mentioned diversity. So what about the academic partners? Ines, how do you assess the current situation at European universities? Digital transformation topics are not always part of the compulsory curriculum for administrative scientists. And the question is, are the administrative sciences well positioned with regard to digital transformation when we look at, for example, study programs or research funding? What do you think?
Yeah, this is my favorite topic because we are so bad at it. And the reason why I'm saying this is that we are obviously also organized in silos, right? If you look at MPA programs or MPP programs, we train students in very traditional ways. We have a silo for statistics, for economics, for finance, sometimes for public management, but not always. And then you have sometimes an elective where you can also do new digital stuff for e-government. And then we train people usually in frameworks, that theoretical frameworks that they need to understand. And so there are two things that are missing for me. One is, in my opinion, digital has to be part of each and every topic. And the other one is we need to expose students to practice so that when they then enter the civil service or become consultants, which is usually also the case, then they need to have the right skills. They need to be able to jump right in or bring something new to the table. I have a terrible echo, so I'm sorry if that's if I'm slow. So how do we do this? In terms of moving digital into the core curriculum, obviously this is a major uphill battle, but think about every single project that our future students will be working on will be digital. I get lots of emails from former students who tell me, wish I would have taken one of your electives because seriously, the 3 projects I'm assigned to, they all are digital now. And they don't have the understanding of how to manage those projects. They don't know how to set up requirements. They don't know how to talk to the software developers or to external IT consultants who are then building those things for them. There might be part of this at the beginning, but they never talk eye to eye to those people. So we need to bring them to that level where they understand what are digital components of, if we constantly talk about platforms, for example, and what is at risk if you don't know and don't ask the right questions, or you're trying to change things at the application stack that has deep impact then on the rest of the technology stack. So those kinds of conversations, even asking the right questions, would already push them forward, and the quality of the service that comes out afterwards might be much, much higher. We also need to talk about acquisition and public finance and how we fund those types of large-scale software projects that sometimes take a year, but they are not done when the actual platform is set up, because digital is never just one project. It's a program, and it goes on, and you have service requirements that you also have to set up. So the big conversation that we need to have, I think, and it doesn't matter if we are training career civil servants or if we are training potentially people who go in as consultants or to go to vendors, they need to have this deep knowledge about public administration, but then at the same time, they need to understand how to work on digital projects from now on. And you gain that by obviously bringing this into the rest of the curriculum and not making this one elective that you do in your free time because you want to have a fun class. And then those kinds of projects that we can bring into the classroom, I think, are really essential, because our students need to have cutting edge knowledge and be able to already, while they're at the university or in other types of programs, work on those issues and are exposed to new work practices so that they have seen it, and they, even though if they might be working with a leader who hasn't seen it, they can bring in those new skills and can ask for them. And I think that's really crucial.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's focus on a very specific skill. Let's talk about IT security. Ines mentioned risks, so maybe this would fit pretty well. IT security is playing an increasingly important role with regard to digital skills, so the knowledge required is changing rapidly in line with the technological developments. And so my question to Lukas is, how can this urgent need for qualification be met?
So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on this podium, and it's very nice to be here in a physical manner, visiting this wonderful view. So it's great to be here. In regards to your question, how can we get more of these qualifications on IT security out there? I think we need success stories. I think these guys now working in IT security, they're most of the time they're working somewhere in the back, probably in a dark room, one would imagine, and nobody sees them ever, and they mostly get not known by anybody. And it's difficult with these success stories, because if you post success stories to IT security successes, automatically you promote a target. So most of the PR departments just don't want to do success stories on IT security, because it might really get a problem. But I think we have to make heroes out of these guys, because they are in many matters. Because as you mentioned, the case of COVID cases being posted in an Excel file, well, that's awful. And there are so many cases where that does not happen, but we don't hear about these cases in any way. So I think that might be important, and all these issues that have been mentioned already, like continuous learning, using all type of media, using the communities, big communities like traveling and enabling IT guys to travel to the RSA security conference. That's an expensive issue for a company. We do that, for example, and we get large benefits from the guys going there, visiting these conferences. And there's also the local communities, like local trust networks in Austria we have that we use, and the IT guys are really happy to be included there and to have a exchange group and not working solely on themselves, with them alone. I want to focus on one special skill, and I think that has also already been mentioned, and it combines with the issue of risk and being allowed to take risk. For me, IT security is no longer about closing down everything and shutting systems up and keeping anybody and everything from getting in or out. IT has changed. IT security has changed to enabling services for people. And that's, I cannot overstatement how important that is for us. Especially as an Austrian state printing house, you would think that IT security has to be 100% on everything, and it is in the areas where we need it. But in the areas where we work on digitalization of ID documents, we have to take risks. And it's very difficult for a state printing house to admit that we take risks. And these IT guys, they have to stand for the level of taking risks as the like. And there's one case that's very prominent and very interesting, and I think it's the discussion around using cloud services. It's so easy for a politician, it's so easy for a manager to say, we never use cloud system because that will never be secure, we only trust our own systems. But there are so many wrong statements around these, for example, for using cloud systems. I think that's a topic we have to discuss, and that's a skill these IT security people need. They have to provide arguments to managers and also to politicians, and politicians also need that skill of going for risks, accepting risks, and also being able to communicate risks then to the public to be able to cope with the IT security world as it just develops, because everybody's faster than the governments these days. And that's hopefully going to change, but it will be a hard job for governments to keep up with the speed of the public-private sector, not even mentioning the darker sides of the web.
So we see a lot of challenges, and so far I can't see any questions in the chat, so please feel free to get involved in our conversation. And maybe let's start with the second round of questions. And I would start with Silvana. And let's talk about digital literacy again. E-government services are aimed at the whole population. And which measures are suitable to achieve the necessary digital literacy? What concrete actions and experiences are there in Italy?
So thank you for the question. So the group of people with low digital literacy is big in Italy. According to the last Digital Economic and Society Index, almost approximately 1 person in 2, 1 over 2 people have low digital skills here in the country. At the same time, we have a large group of elderly people. 22.5% of the population is 65 years old and over that. Therefore, that's an important topic here in the country, and building new digital services from the public and from the private is an opportunity to help people to make the change and come into the digital world. But it requires proper measures. It requires special care, because scaling from the early adopters into the majority is most of the time the most difficult part of any digital transformation programs I led here in Italy or elsewhere in the countries. So we are taking special measures. I am leading digital identities, which is one of the key building blocks of our services. And in that respect, we are exactly in this phase where we are expanding from the early adopters. At the moment, we have 13 million of digital identities in the country. That means that more than 1 people in 5 has got digital identities. And we are planning a set of measures to help out this phase and the expansion going forward. Number 1, we are thinking about simplified processes for the elderly, so to decrease any barrier for them and to enter into the digital services. And that's very important, because especially the product features, they need to be easy for them as much as possible to enter into the digital world. Number 2, we are including face-to-face support for people who have low digital skills, and that's very, very important. We are working with any public entities, any private companies to make sure this happens, and their support teams have all the information to help out this phase, because we are aware that people with low digital capabilities do prefer this way of interaction. In number 3, we are planning longer transition period. That's equally important, because so at least this must be 2 or 3 times the transition period we are thinking for the technology savvy group. We know that these people take more time into the transition. I wanted also to talk about accessibility from all categories, which is very, very important. And to this regard, we talked about user centricity before and human-centric design. We are at the moment working very closely with the Association of blind or legally protected people, or all fragile categories, because this is the only way. True listening is the only way for us to understand the way forward and to design services that are they're easy for them to use and to adopt. More broadly, last April, Italy adopted a national strategy and plan to increase digital literacy in the country. It's a combination of actions. It is an alliance between the public and the private, more than 100 of initiatives, and any one digital transformation team, any services we are building, we are working very closely with them to make sure that we can build and we are an opportunity for people in the country, for citizens in the country, to start adopting digital.
Are the people interested in the topics of digital transformation? Often I wonder how to address the broad population. What do you think?
It is not just the public, it's everywhere. There are sometimes cultural resistances to make the change, which are normal. But in some groups of people are more important, and you need to find a way. You need to find a way with them. You, of course, need to make So communication is very important to this regard, and support, because you need to find an angle with them, and you need to communicate in a consistent, coherent and structured way for them to make the change, because it is absolutely true, not everyone is willing to change their habit, and that's normal. So you need to explain why. You need to find what we used to call the killer application, or whatever the reason for them to make the change. It's not always easy with some groups of people, but you need to plan that not everyone is coming at the same time. I think that's important.
Thank you, Silvana. Concerning the whole population, we are discussing a lot about digital sovereignty from a user perspective. How is it being ensured that the citizens, for example in Austria, Lukas, use EID services in an informed and confident manner?
Well, in one word, it's difficult. It is ensured right now by having a system of services available to EID users in a very restricted way. So it's right now a little bit cumbersome to get governmental electronic ID, and then it limits itself to the highest level of security. So it's only a certain amount of services right now available. And I think that's a problem in itself, because when you only focus on the highest security, so that you, and again, we're on the topic of risk, if you never take a risk to have a service not functioning or something not working, because you always focus on the highest level, you will never get to the services the broad public wants, and thus you will never get to penetration, and that's one of the main problems. We have not an EID system in Austria, at least that I would say you would have to have at least 50% of penetration, possibly better 70%, and we're far away from that. But it makes me very happy that there are very good initiatives from our current minister, Margrethe Schramberg, who proposed the co-working of governmental ID systems and private and business ID systems for the future. And I think that will be a breakthrough challenge. Also combined with the possibility to have special services within the system of the government ID, like electronic driver's licenses, for example. Because that's something that might make a change, because that is for the first time some e-government product that actually somebody wants, and you don't have to push it to them. They are asking for these features. And that's one of the, well, we've so long been looking for killer features. I don't say the driver's license is the one killer feature, but it's one of the more important features where finally somebody wants something from the government and you don't have to push it to them. So right now it's on restriction, and I think that's going to change rapidly, also thanks to COVID, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. We have now one question on the chat from Oliver. How do we achieve this change of mindset? Is vocational training really enough, or do we need a new generation of leaders? What do you think? Who wants to jump in? Ines, yes.
So I don't think it has to do much with generational mind shifts, or that there's an older generation that blocks everything. It really has to do with the type of leader that you have in front of you and who learned from whom, and what their own experiences were. We've seen this during COVID. I've done interviews in the German federal government during that time, and we've seen more senior leaders being very, very pushing the buttons here and moving their people online, and then we've seen younger leaders who kept people in their offices just to have control over them. So I don't necessarily think that this is a generational issue, in the same way that I don't think that we have to think about citizens at not having the skills, because they have them, because they do this all in the private sector. What is needed, and maybe I can kind of preview one of the answers I had prepared for something else, but I think we need to define what the minimum viable knowledge is that we want civil servants to have, or what the public sector needs to know, so that the dependency on outside labor is not that high, and that we make some of the jobs sexy again, so that people actually want to work in government and don't see it just as a secure way of getting to retirement. And then we need to think about what are the skills or the competencies that generally civil servants need to have, and then distinguish those from specialists. You know, we all of a sudden we then start to talk about data science skills for a general public servant. This is a specialist kind of skill to have, and we need certain types of professionals to come into government and be willing to work on career paths in government. But what is the knowledge and the competence in terms of digital that every civil servants need to have? And I've seen governments define this kind of minimal viable knowledge, and then work toward accomplishing this by setting up programs, by setting up career paths, by providing free education and training in those areas. And that makes a lot of sense, because we, in that mindset, we haven't actually reached that cornerstone. We still think mostly about, how to mitigate risks, how to obey all the legal steps, how to follow the rules, and these kinds of things that are extremely important, obviously, for the public sector, because that's what makes bureaucracies very efficient. But then we need to honestly assess what's needed in terms of identifying and then customizing programs and making them available in either those low-profile ways that Cordula talked about. Just watching a 10-minute video might be enough. But then I know that the German government is also working on an e-government campus to kind of move those skills after the fact back in when we already finished your formal training, but you need to be adapting to the new. So we can think about ways on doing this in-house, and then combining this with existing public administration knowledge and traditional kind of skills that we train people with, or outsource it and require then those organizations who are providing the training to also do this with the public sector in their minds.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Going on with a focus on the employees, Ernst BÜRGER and Ines already mentioned it. Many projects in the public sector run more or less according to agile methods. So how successful do these approaches work in the public sector? And are there specific competencies to be built up in this field as well? Cordula, what are your experiences from practice?
First of all, for me, agility is an attitude. It's really an attitude. It's if I am open-minded, if I am human-centered, if I am transparent about the progress, and if I am willing to stop a process when I see that it's not working. All of this means for me agility. And yes, in the federal government, we have some approaches for agile methods. One of the very, very close to my heart in the Federal Ministry of the Interior, you will meet Jan-Ole Beyer tomorrow, I guess, and he leads the project group on digital innovation team here within the Federal Ministry. And as Silvana told us some minutes ago about this breakfast with Italian Dolci, Jan-Ole Beyer initiated, I guess, 3 weeks ago, early morning coffee, virtual coffee with Berlin bread at all Tuesdays at 8 in the morning, just to get an idea, to keep in touch and to exchange experience. So good morning innovation in Berlin is in the Federal Ministry, in the federal government, all Tuesdays at 8 o'clock. So this is one innovative and agile project. We've got 30 enterprises, 13 administrations who participate in a network named Next, and they collaborate, they participate, they join events just to get in touch and share their experience with agile method. Is still increasing our experience, because it's not the first method in work in the Federal Ministry, of course. And I have no idea whether you have recognized when the pandemic started in March, we had a very huge VIR versus virus hackathon here in Germany. It was another very agile step for Germany as well as for the EU, I think. So just to give you a quick example of some methods, and as I'm speaking, I would like to agree with Lukas on the ID scheme. It's the same approach in Germany. We want to make ID more interesting for companies. We want to do it with the driver's license as well, and because of sovereignty, it is very important that we have an ID, national ID, which is sovereign, and we can show it's not the Googles, it's not the others who need our data for commercial reasons. Just to have an alternative, and I think we must think this in a European manner. It's something we could share all together with Italy, with Austria. I guess the European way would be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have another comment or question from Max Müller in our chat. He mentions an European government academy with massive open online courses and e-learning for all. What do you think? Do we need such academy, and where are we in practice?
To whom?
Yeah, Silvana,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that would be great. I mean, not just as an opportunity to learn more, because actually there are different ways of finding online material, but it's also, I think it would be great to learn together as Europe. I mean, we said before how important it is to have our strategy, and I think it's important to have our competencies to exchange experiencing, to be part of the European team in that journey. I think that would be great. I mean, I don't know if we need that. Surely, I think it will be a great opportunity to come together in our future, because we will build the future through learning and through working together, our future.
Mm-hmm. Ines?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is already underway. So the Interoperability Academy of the European Commission, ISA Square, they are already developing skills and competencies for different types of roles in public administrations, and they are setting up the first online classes for this that people, I understand, can take in their own spare time. They can take them at their own pace and so on. And they have done very similar steps than the ones that I have outlined. So they have identified what the competencies might be, and they thought about what kind of roles do people play in public administrations. And then for each of those roles, they then created content that's freely accessible. So look up ISA Square, the Interoperability Academy. It's an unfortunate term to use, a technological term, interoperability, to talk about digital competencies, but they look at organizational competencies, technological competencies, and all these kinds of things. So it's a great project, I think.
So I see the project is already running, and we just have to wait until we can see the first results. Okay, yeah. Sorry, Cordula, do you want to add something? Yes, please.
Yes, I guess this kickoff today is another example where we are getting to the point. It's about sharing our experience with innovation. So this kickoff is answering your question too. It's not e-government, it's innovation, but it's very important, and I'm very glad we've got this kickoff today.
Yes, thank you. And we have another question. What is your opinion on a practice when a leader rather creates a parallel team of more digitally savvy people? A downside of this is lack of historic memory on issues. The plus is speed of delivery, is the question in the chat. Does anyone want to answer this question? Yes,
I'm happy
Ines.
to say something.
Ines,
I mean,
thank
this
you.
is basically the practice of setting up digital service teams. I think Silvana can say more about this with the Team Digitale, but it has been born out of necessity, right? That we have in very mature bureaucracies, we have legacy systems that need to keep running, where we don't innovate on them and we don't change much for very good reasons. Maybe we don't have the COBOL programmers anymore to go through 10 million lines of code. And so out of necessity, then digital service teams are also Jan Ole's team in Berlin was born because we needed to bring in new practices, and you can't really experiment with new practices on a live system necessarily. So many countries around the world have set up those digital service teams. They are very attractive as employers, obviously, because they leave a lot of freedom, and there's in terms of the scale of the impact that these teams have for millions of people is just mind-blowing. I'm not sure if the person who asked that question was referring to that. Otherwise, if it's in one team that was not set up to do this, I would highlight this practice as unbelievable dysfunction in an organization. But I think those dedicated teams that come in to bring new practices are of high value, and they've achieved immense innovations in the last few years.
Yeah, thank you. Silvana, please.
Yes, if I can add something. So the digital transformation team was established in 2016 with the target of building the operating system of the country. So the building blocks and the digital services on top of which we can create and build services for the citizens, for the public, for the business. Then the team, starting from this January, is now part of the Minister of Innovation and Digitalization here in Italy. I wanted to say that it's a group of people coming from very different backgrounds, some in the public, some in the private, different ages, different culture, and alongside building the building blocks of the digital components of our country. As said before, our mission is to establish different ways of working. We actually use agile methodologies with GitHubs and human centricity, service design, all the things we said before. And inevitably, when we work with other departments in the public or other companies, even in the private, not necessarily the others are working this way. But our mission is also to work together and show another way of working and how effective it might be work truly in a collaborative ways. With the citizens, we are building up services in open collaboration. So we are every day asking their feedbacks. We are working together. This is very exciting. And again, not always easy, but very exciting. So everyone at the digital transformation team thinks we have this mission to bring to the country services, but also another way of working. And I think that's great.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have to come to the last question. Ines, what advice do you have for public authorities to build up the necessary digital competencies as quickly as possible? In your experience, what are the 2 or maybe 3 most important measures for heads of public authorities?
That's a really tough question. So I think some of the things I already mentioned before. I think we need to have a really honest discussion of what's lacking and be willing to bring this in-house again and not rely on external expertise, because then that makes us basically an empty shell, and we are just the ones who are constantly running behind in the public sector. What this means to me is an honest assessment what's lacking, see what we can bring into our in-house academies, even build some of those up again, and think about the future civil service as a digital civil service, and then combine those traditional skills that are very good Bureaucracies, those like Germany, are very efficient. They work really well. We can be proud of that accomplishment. But what does it now mean to have the right skills also for the digital era? So some of those skills we learned ad hoc during the pandemic, but we also seen those major gaps. So make an assessment of what the minimal viable knowledge needs to be for every single civil servant, and not just the ones who want to do this or who are specialists in certain skill areas already. And then think about how do we, others have already said that before me, how does this become lifelong learning? Because digital transformation, or in itself digital, won't end next year and then I have all the skills and they will be the same for the rest of my career. Instead, I have to update them continuously. So think about customized programs for roles, for different types of people, and then don't run behind what's really necessary right now.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? I think this is a great finish for our discussion. Thank you so much for your contributions, for the discussion, and yeah, take care and maybe see you in the next sessions. We have now a coffee break, and the next session starts at 2:30. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.